Thank you very much. We can take our seats. Program Director, thank you for the opportunity. The Premier of the Eastern Cape Province, Premier Oscar Mabuza, thank you very much for welcoming us in your province, beautiful province. Minister of Small Business Development, Mr. Landabeni Abrahams. There's a name that I heard today of the Premier. I don't want to repeat that name. Deputy Minister, our MECs, our mayors present, district mayors, and our European Union ambassador, Her Excellency Sandra, our distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. We are grateful to be part of this symposium for the opportunity that you have granted to us to participate to this National Township, Rural and Informal Economy Symposium, which is a joint multiple stakeholder initiative aimed at elevating the informal, social, and solidarity economies by drawing insights from international best practices in order to inform our national policy options. Given the limited time and the lengthy program ahead of you, we wish to begin by asserting the national problem statement that your symposium will have to grapple with and hopefully bring some solutions to. As the global economy slowly recovers from the unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic, communities around the world are counting the extent of the social, economic, and infrastructural devastation that has been left behind. One of the many steps that government had to take to stop the spread of the virus and slow the rate at which new infections were happening was to put severe lockdowns on the whole country. This, we agree, it has affected our economy and affected jobs. Contrary to the initial estimate, the pandemic has not been a very great equalizer. Its impact has particularly paralyzed livelihoods and well-being of those who are already in the margins of our society. The majority of those people, of those affected, are primarily your low-income household located in provinces like the Eastern Cape, in the outskirts of our cities, small towns and rural villages, where the poor and marginalized are concentrated. The decimation of the informal economy as a result of the COVID-19 restrictions brought about misery for many of those who derive their livelihood, their income, sustainable livelihoods through active participation across sectors of the informal economy. The UN General Secretary best described this reality when he said, open quotes, "The pandemic has demonstrated the fragility of our world It has laid bare the risk we have ignored for decades. Inadequate health systems, the gaps in social protection, structural inequalities, environmental degradation, the climate crisis. The economic fallout of the pandemic is affecting those who work in the informal economy, small and medium businesses, and people with carrying responsibilities who are mainly women. We face the deepest global recession since probably World War II, of the broadest collapse in incomes since 1870s. Millions and millions of our people could be pushed into extreme poverty. We could see families of historic proportions. COVID-19 has been likened to an X-ray revealing the fractures in the fragile skeletons of societies we've built for time. Nevertheless, we are of the opinion that if we are not organized as business, as labor and community in our respective constituencies and working together at NEDLEC, we will have been worse when it comes to our response to the pandemic and the nationwide lockdown. As a country, we held hands together. We tried to work together and fight the pandemic. We are better off than other countries. Quite frankly, as we grapple with these social and economic and political afterlives of the pandemic, we must say our democratic dispensation is at crossroad. When a stronger economy, improved well-being, and shared prosperity are held up as a yardstick to measure how far we have come, the results are very clear for everyone to notice. Whereas the people remain resolute in fulfilling the promise of freedom and democracy that we've shared and embraced since 1994, the hard truth that we must face and confront is that we are not there yet where we should be. Our labor market and industrial policy choices have not lived up to the expectation of the majority and international parties who supported our struggle for freedom, leaving us with an unhealthy concentration of income, of wealth, of power, and opportunities in the hands of the already privileged. Adversely, this results in a steady rise in chronic levels of basic social and economic insecurity for those already in the margins of our society, most of whom survive through the informal economy and are cut off from global value chains and mainstream economic activities. Nearly almost 3 decades in our democratic dispensation, more than half of our population live in poverty. And despite visible progress we've made, we remain one of the dangerously unequal societies in the world. Using information obtained from tax data, researchers that revealed that in the year 2020, 1% of the population of South Africa owns about 50% of the country's wealth. And the top 10% of the population owns more than 90% of the wealth collectively. Beyond equal political rights, it can be said that our economy is fundamentally that of the top 10%, by the top 10%, for the top 10%. Whichever way you look at it, this is a very unhealthy and unsustainable state of affairs, which undermines our collective efforts as a democratic government to build a socially cohesive society that is united in its pursuit for an inclusive, equitable, and a better life for all our people. We are thus hoping that this symposium will narrow down the problem statement and help to position the role of the informal sector and its inherent potential in restoring the livelihoods, the dignity of the most vulnerable in our society. This is the challenge that you as researchers, scholars, leaders, and community organizers need to live up to. Moreover, all our reconstruction and recovery efforts will require that we as a nation remove the mask and get to terms with the true state of our nation. We should not be afraid of a real conversation about rebuilding that will lead to economic emancipation and growth for everyone. We should be alive to the reality that the biggest risk to our nation-building efforts and social stability is the marginalization and the structural exclusion of many South Africans from meaningful economic participation and empowerment. If not proactively addressed, this has a potential to engender popular discontent that undermines our democratic dispensation. It is critical that we pay particular attention to how government at all levels can create an enabling policy and regulatory environment geared towards supporting informal economy. At municipal level, our regulations of informal economy at times are very obstructionist. Even though municipalities are in charge of trading rules, market rules, street trading bylaws, beach bylaws in their own areas, it is important to make sure that these rules are always enforced with the utmost respect for everyone's dignity and human rights, including our hawkers. Our efforts to cut down on unnecessary paperwork and bureaucratic processes, which includes the removal of the burdensome regulations and arbitrary barriers to participation, such as those that make it difficult to obtain a permit as a hawker. We need to enhance the overall capacity of the state to fast-track application and administrative approvals to regularize trade and economic activities of the informal sector. Informal sector needs to be supported by ensuring that registration and compliance processes are simplified and avoid unnecessary confrontations between informal traders and municipal authorities. Let's make all these processes very simple for our people to follow. We need to improve access to modern technologies and platforms that enable informal traders to modernize their businesses in terms of sourcing goods, bulk buying, and conducting safe financial transactions. Integrated support in terms of funding and access to markets by small businesses in the informal sector remains critical to ensuring that this sector thrives to create more wealth and contribute to the gross domestic product of our country. Our key measure of success in economic reconstruction and recovery will be our ability to respond decisively to the challenge of high youth unemployment. This has reached unacceptable high levels. A lot of jobs in both formal and informal sectors have been lost. For instance, in the second quarter of this year, Stats SA reported that 12.3 million people are jobless. 8 million people are still looking for jobs. 3.6 million are discouraged from looking for employment, while 700,000 have given up. The results continue to show that young people remain vulnerable in the labor market. In comparison to the first quarter of 2022, the overall number of young people between the age of 15 and 34 who were without jobs rose by 2%, or 92,000, to 4.8 million in the second quarter of 2022. In the second quarter of this year, the unemployment rate in the country was 33.9%, as reported by Stats SA. This represents a decrease of 0.6% from the 34.5% experienced in the first quarter. Even though we are very glad about this small drop, it doesn't change the fact that the country has a big problem of unemployment, especially among young people. This effectively assists young people. We need to realize that the full potential of our rural and township economies can change this situation for the better. We need to focus mostly on our enablers, our efforts to create jobs in the informal sectors. We need targeted support to youth-owned businesses through the provision of mentorship, funding, key infrastructure, and access to markets. Youth-owned businesses should be creators of entrepreneurship and jobs. We think, therefore, that your symposium should take this reality into account. As the UN General Secretary emphasized, those who work in the informal sector, small and medium businesses, and people with caring responsibility, primarily women, have been affected by the 2009 economic crisis and the subsequent pandemic. That means the situation still persists. What this means is that no economic stimulus package or recovery plan will take off until it is rooted in elevating the informal sector, SMMEs, and solidarity economics. The critical measure of progress in this initiative shall be the material change in the people's income earning ability and job and wealth creating potential. Our country has always cared about the informal sector and the important role of small and medium-sized enterprises in fighting poverty and reducing social and economic gaps. Our 1995 white paper on the National Strategy for the Development and Promotion of Small Businesses assessed that with millions of South Africans unemployed and underemployed, government has no option but to give its full attention to the task of job creation and generating sustainable and equitable growth. SMMEs are an important way for our country to deal with the problems like creating jobs, growing the economy, and making sure that everyone gets a fair shot. These words were said then in 1995. They're still relevant in South Africa. After apartheid, we started to understand the importance of SMME development for economic growth, job creation, and getting rid of poverty. Indeed, our National Development Plan, our Vision 2030, sets out targets of creating more or less 11 million jobs by 2030, of which 90% are expected to come from SMMEs. As ambitious as these goals may sound, they will only be reached if this symposium benchmarks the best ways to do things. This is because the economy is uncertain, unstable right now as we speak. We want to encourage that the Department of Small Business Development must work together with our provinces, must work with our municipalities in order to realize this very great ambition. We need more evidence-based research looking into ways of reducing the high failure rate of small businesses that are not making it. We support these small businesses, but they fail. We give them money, but they are not making it. This symposium must take time to look at how best, what is it that we're doing wrong in our support for small businesses, so that we can correct this situation and ensure that these SMMEs are able to create the necessary jobs that we're looking for. This symposium must deal with the unstoppable force of rural to urban migration and its implication for city level and small town economies. The Premier has explained this phenomenon very well. To say those that are in Johannesburg, from the Eastern Cape, working there, they went there looking for opportunities. You only wish that when they come back, they can come back with some of the good infrastructure that they enjoy in Joburg. Sustaining livelihoods across social strata in general and low-income households in particular has been and continue to be greatly influenced by the phenomenon of urbanization. The mass movement of our people from rural to urban settings and the consequent physical and societal changes to such urban settings. The force of urbanization and its key drivers continue to shape both human and non-human activity in ways that can neither be avoided nor slowed down. The odds of achieving the provision of livable, safe, resource-efficient, just, equitable, and socially inclusive human settlements to low-income communities are thus inextricably linked to the abilities of cities to anticipate, manage, and respond to urbanization trends and challenges and opportunities. By this, we're trying to say our municipalities must always be alive of the fact that people are constantly moving. They must follow and monitor the trends, the movement of people, and find reasons why these people are moving. And if possible, try and stop this movement by doing the right things. By 2008, the proportion of the global population living in urban areas had overtaken the ones that are in rural communities. Today, more than 4 billion people in the whole world, well over half of the world's population, live in towns and cities. The UN World's Urbanization Prospect Report forecast this trend to reach 68%, almost over 2/3 of the global population by 2050. That means people are moving away from rural settings to towns and cities. Emerging economies such as ours are projected to experience the highest and most rapid rates of urbanization in the coming decades. That means what you have seen, Premier, here is going to be worse. More and more people are going to leave the Eastern Cape if we don't do something about this situation. The United Nations thinks that by 2050, Africa and Asia will be home to more than 90% of the world's urban population. As massive size of production, consumption, and industrial activity, our city economies remain the most influential factors in urban change. In our country, 63% of the population already lives in urban setups. This figure is expected to rise to 71% by 2030 and probably to 80% by 2050. Put another way, by 2050, it means 8 out of 10 people in South Africa will be living in urban areas. If you see 10 people working there, moving there, you must know that 8 out of those people, they live in cities. For as long as our cities continue to be migration magnets, attracting people, this symposium must grapple with the planning and the development implication of this reality. Because if we don't, all these people that are moving into these cities, you'll find them in informal settlements, squatting around these cities and creating a health problem. Although the reasons for an influx of migration to these cities may vary, the pursuit of employment and related economic opportunities and amenities, these are well-established drivers. People are going to these cities looking for better opportunities, looking for employment. Now, it is possible to reverse this situation. Given the fact that currently 63% of the population lives in urban areas, To talk about poverty in South Africa is to fundamentally refer to urban poverty and its relationship to the rural poor, who are already projected to be on their way to the city in search of better life, better opportunities, and amenities. Some of our people, as we speak now, they are thinking that they must leave our rural areas and must go to the cities because they think there are better opportunities there. From scenario planning point of view, the key question for the symposiums are: what infrastructure planning and provision should anticipate the growth of the informal economy as a key area of economic emancipation? What financial support instruments should be designed and implemented to meaningfully support the informal economy? How will we ensure that small businesses and informal traders can source goods and services cost effectively as part of leveraging economies of scale? What enabling bylaws and regulations will be required to enable the success and the growth of the informal economy as a driver of jobs and sustainable livelihoods? These are some of the questions that we want to leave with the symposium. There are, however, some critical questions that symposium must reflect on the shape of a new path for the support of our informal economy. I wish to leave this symposium with these provocations and allow you space to imagine a more humane society in which the informal, social, and solidarity economies take center stage in aiding our war on poverty, inequality, and unemployment. As we have said many times before, cannot be responsible for the implementation of the National Development Plan, but government, together with business, together with communities, must join hands, partner, in order to realize the National Development Plan. For this to work, everyone involved needs to work together. The goal is to take strong steps to solve the social and economic problems caused by inequality and poverty. Governments at all levels must work together. Sectors of society must work together. Because without resolving these socio-economic issues, which are a cornerstone of nation building, our efforts at nation building will not be sustainable. Our project of social cohesion will not be achieved. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you.